All right, everybody, welcome back. We are inside of Cinema 4D here, and we are going to take a look at some kind of different common lighting setups and what they mean and when to use them. This is a model that I found on ArtStation, so I won't be able to provide this for you guys. I am going to provide this project file so that you guys can actually bring in your own models, and I'll kind of show you where to get those once we actually get into the scene where we actually need to build out our specific scene. So I chose this model specifically because of the amount of detail and everything, because I really wanted to emphasize how important it is to control the shadows in the image to make it look not only more realistic, but more visually appealing. The first lighting setup that we are going to talk about is the most simple lighting setup that you will come across inside of Cinema 4D, and that's just frontal lighting. And this is, as you can see, it really kind of flattens out the image and basically gives highlight to all the detail inside of the character's face there. Now, this isn't necessarily a lighting setup that I recommend. As you can see, for the most part, other than the character and the amount of appeal in the detail and appeal in the character's face, it's very flat and it's kind of boring. Now, when would you want to use this type of lighting? So this type of lighting is actually mainly focused on things if there's something specific in the character's face that you need to highlight. So for instance, if this character had a specific face tattoo, or a particular detail of jewelry, things of that sort where everything needs to be fully lit, this is probably one of the best lighting setups to go with. But that is for a very, very specific reason. If we are talking about cinematic lighting, maybe for portrait lighting, this could work well for you, because you do have to highlight. You want to highlight as much detail and show as much of the information in the face as possible. You're not really trying to control shadow there. You're more trying to highlight the detail in the face. So that would be a scenario where you would kind of use this particular type of lighting. Just to let you guys know too, I am working in Octane, and the reason why I am doing that is because being able to jump back and forth into different lighting setups is going to make this a little bit easier than the physical renderer, and I don't want you guys have to sit around and wait for me to let this render as we talk about these particular lighting setups. So so that is frontal lighting, and that is mainly the type of situations that you would want to use that for. So like I said, I never use this. I probably will in the future once I start getting into more character creation and development, like ZBrush, and creating custom models like this. But as for now, I don't use this particular type of lighting, but it is useful in some applications. So let's go ahead and move to our next lighting setup. And the next lighting setup is called split lighting. So as you can see here with split lighting, we have our main light that is sitting right here to the complete side of the face of our character. And as you can see, what happens here is that we see some detail. We see most of the detail on the right side of the character, and then that character kind of starts to fall off into the shadows. Now, this is a very interesting type of lighting setup because this also allows you to create this sense of mysteriousness, but also revealing who the character is. We don't know who fully they are, but we can see that this character, is some type of horned individual, seems kind of menacing. Probably some type of fantasy type of creature or being. So that is essentially how this lighting is work, where everything kind of falls off to the shadow and we only see one side of the face. So I don't see this lighting too often. I mainly see this type of lighting in such genres like horror or mystery, something where we are trying to accentuate a certain level of mysteriousness in our character. Let's go ahead and move to our next lighting setup. Now, the next lighting setup we have is called fill lighting. Now, if we take off the the left light, now we're back into our kind of split lighting ordeal here. Now, the common lighting setup that you will find mostly in the real world, the most common thing that you'll hear about is 3-point lighting. And 3-point lighting is where you have your key light, which is what our current light here on the light is acting as. That is going to be the most intense light that is on the subject. Now, your key light, one thing that I was confused about when learning about lighting and how to set up lights when I was in film school was I didn't know, okay, does it matter if the key light is on the fill or on the right or the left? Does that really matter? No, it doesn't. Your key light, just remember, is the light that is going to get the highest amount of intensity on your subject. So that is your main light. If we want to add in some more detail, mainly what I did was I added in what's called a fill light. And that fill light, if we look at the left light here, let's go into our settings here. The key light is at a power of 15, but I go to my fill light, that is at a power of 1, and that is just to bring in a little bit more information and here on the side. Now this is one of the most common lighting setups that you'll see, easiest lighting setups that you'll see in CG and also in filmmaking. Another thing with this type of lighting, which is if we wanted to add to it and make it a 3-point lighting setup, we would basically just take one of these lights and we'll put it to the back, and I'll show you what that looks like. So what we're going to do is we are going to take our fill light and we're going to duplicate it. I'm just going to hit hold control and drag my light to the top, and now I'm just going to hit R, and then I'm going to rotate it, hold down shift until it hits 90 degrees there, and then we're going to position it behind our main character here and let that show us what we get. Let me make sure we're doing this properly, and then I'm going to erase it, and let's add in some more power. And as you can see, what's happening here is that backlighting, our backlight is giving some nice light, more dimension to our character here by highlighting these edges, which is a really nice effect. So let's turn that off. So we can see, let's go one by one actually, excuse me. Okay, so this is our split lighting, and we see our key light. Then we add in a little bit more, whoops, wrong one. We add in a little bit more fill to kind of enlighten some of the information on his face here, and to kind of separate it from its background. Another thing, or what we did, is we added in a background light, and we'll just call this BG light for now. And so that gives this really nice kind of, you can see where those details are coming out on the edges and everything like that. So that is a really common, very, very good lighting setup. Usually just for, you know, best practices, what I'll do is, instead of having the light, not best practices, excuse me, this is personal preference because I like the way that indirect lighting actually makes the character look. Instead of actually pointing, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Instead of pointing my light directly at my character like this, sometimes what I like to do is let's create a plane. I'm gonna hit R on the keyboard, and I'm gonna hold down shift to rotate until it's, oops, hold down shift, and then it'll snap to 90 degrees. I'm gonna put this to the back of my character, and we are going to throw on a yellow texture. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my light, and instead of, let me, just bear with me here. I'm going to put a Octane, oops, wrong tag. 40 tags, Octane object tag. I'm going to turn it off in the camera. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my background light, and I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to have it hit this back wall here. We're gonna do 180 degrees. Remember, hold down shift to get that to snap. And then I'm gonna spread the light out. And I actually need to go back into my camera since this is how Octane works. And we're gonna really crank up the light on the background here. And we should start to see, if I'm doing this properly, we should start to see some of the yellow light kind of bouncing onto our character. So and you can see that happening right here. It's not as effective as I would like, so maybe what I need to do is, and oh yeah, you can see it right there. It looks like the light itself is kind of blocking my object. So let's oh, okay, I think I know what I need to do. Let's let's just raise the light up, and then we're going to rotate it. And then we need to kind of move it like that. I think that's going to give me a better result. So it's not super sexy, but you'll get the point. So if I come here now, that backlighting is giving me that extra added detail, but it's actually indirect lighting, and it's a little bit softer. It's not as it blends a little bit better with the shadows, as opposed to when you saw the direct lighting. Remember, we talked about indirect and direct lighting. The direct lighting hitting the model actually caused these really sharp transitions in the lighting between the shadows and the edges on his face and the edges on his body. But as you can see, that indirect lighting is kind of smoothly transitioning into the shadows of the character. So that's another way of actually adding in that extra added depth and using color. So we'll go more into that later. So let's go ahead and get rid of that plane, and we're going to move into our next lighting setup, which is the Badger. And let's go to no colors, and let's back out of our camera here. And a Badger lighting, as you can see, is set up this way, where we have two lights of even intensity. If we look at the lights here, we look at their intensity, they're both going to be at 15 up here to the right. So you can see that we get this kind of opposite effect when we are doing than what we were doing with the split lighting, where the side of his face was in shadow. Now what's happening is the opposite. The sides of the face are actually illuminated, and now the complete front of his face is in darkness. So this is what's called a Badger lighting. I think this type of lighting is super cinematic. I love it. It reveals just enough detail inside of the character's face that it can still make it visually appealing, but it also creates this sense of mysteriousness and gives it more definition. The eye kind of just falls back as it looks over, kind of the topology of the model. So Badger lighting, I think, is really, really cool. This is another lighting setup that is used to give a sense of mysteriousness, and usually it's pretty, straightforward on where we actually place those. Now, one thing we can do is, if we wanted to change, how the lighting is falling, always remember we have other options here. So let me go to my Cinema 4D tags. I'm going to add a target tag to both of my light setups here, and then we are going to place our main character in that target so that the light continues to focus on it. I'm going to grab both my lights, and I'm just going to start to move them up, and kind of notice what happens as I move those lights. Simply by moving the position of where they are, the lighting and the kind of message of the story changes quite dramatically. So if we look here and we look at the lighting, let me do that. Let's go back into here, back down. If you look here, there's a pretty big difference on, the story that we're telling once we move the lights kind of above our character, as opposed to what they look like, here. So there's a much different story being told now. We can also go in the opposite direction. We can kind of start to move our lighting beneath, and you can even see it here. Now we have a completely different lighting setup, and that tells us kind of a different story within this character. So definitely play with the positions of your lights. Once you have them, this is kind of one of those things where you set up the base, you set up your framework, and then you manipulate it. Once you understand the rules, you can start breaking those rules on the particular lighting setups. Everything I have in this project file is a jumping off point for you. Okay, so definitely, start with these and then start manipulating them, adding color. For instance, one of the interesting ways that, like we saw in the last example, adding color can really change, how you're viewing the object. So now we have more of a story to tell, because now the color is telling me, okay, this seems like this character is in some type of cyberpunk, maybe futuristic city with artificial fluorescent lighting, maybe a city scene, maybe in Tokyo, Japan, or something like that. We start to get an understanding of the actual setting. Not only is this character mysterious, but the also location is kind of mysterious, because we can see this really kind of stylized, specific lighting look that's usually associated with things like cyberpunk. But we don't see any environment. He's completely in darkness, and we can't see the full features of his face. So this is another way to actually start bringing out a kind of a story inside of your renders. So the next thing we're going to look at is loop lighting. Okay, and let me back out of the camera so you can get a bird's eye view of what we have here. So loop lighting is basically, if we look, we have this kind of like a triangle kind of starting to form here, and we have this kind of triangle here on the neck. So this is loop lighting, where the light, oops, let me open this up so we can kind of see the intensity and all that. So the backlighting here is at a 20 intensity, and this light to the right is at the similar intensity, but the backlighting is slightly off-centered from the character. As you can see, it's off-centered from the character and kind of pointing this way, and the fill light, the key light, as you can see, the closest light to the character, giving the most intensity on the face, is actually raised slightly above. And what that's doing is it's pushing the shadows kind of directionally down and to the right. So if I kind of move the light down here, we start to move the shadows to the left this way here. And then, as we go down, the shadows will start to move up into the angle, and so on and so forth. So we'll just demonstrate that. If I move down, now you can see the shadows are starting to be pushed up, and now we have a completely different look just by moving that down. So let's see what other look we would get. Let's go back to our camera. Let's back out of our camera. Let's see what kind of look we get by just moving this backlight. So if I move this backlight down, we start to lose some of the detail here. He starts to become a little bit more mysterious, and then he starts to fall into the shadows again. I think this is kind of cool how the light on the right here is hitting the horn, blocking it, but we can kind of get this swath. Remember, controlling your shadows is very important, making an image look interesting. We see this kind of little swath of light coming over the edge, or over the ear of the character, and then we also still get this little highlight, the edge highlight of the character, to give a little bit of detail. So that is what's called loop lighting, and I actually really like this lighting setup. I think it's pretty cool. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next lighting setup. This is probably going to be the most common lighting setup. This is called Rembrandt Lighting. And as you can see, what Rembrandt Lighting is a light source coming from one, lighting coming from one light source. So it's not quite like split lighting, because we are not directly to the profile shot of our character. As you can see, we're actually a little bit to the left, because we actually want to reveal more information. What ends up happening, and then we pull the lighting up, as like we saw as in the last example, as the light goes up, the shadows will directionally pull into the opposite direction of wherever the light's going. Of course, you know that by just having human eyes, which you see every day, but I just kind of want to reiterate that information. And by pushing this up, we actually start to form this triangle where the nose, the cheek, and the side of the face and the top of the eye actually form this little oasis of light where everything else is actually in shadow. And that's how you're actually doing Rembrandt lighting correctly. Rembrandt lighting was obviously created or coined from the artist Rembrandt. And Rembrandt mainly created this lighting when he was painting, because he was trying to figure out how to paint light and shadows from a light source that was from lighting that was only coming from one light source. And usually that light source was like a candle light or something like that. So, and that's how he learned how to draw, because he knew that if I can get the shadows to kind of form this triangle on the cheek here, I think he felt that that made the image beautiful. So this is what is known as Rembrandt lighting. Very popular in portraits, used quite often. Let's move on to the next one, which is butterfly lighting. And if you look at butterfly lighting, it's a little bit similar to frontal lighting, except with butterfly lighting, we have one light source that's actually full in front of the character, but it's actually to the top and angled up. And what that's doing is, you know that you're doing the butterfly effect, the butterfly lighting effect correctly when under the nose of your character, you start to see this kind of like wet, dark kind of butterfly wedge here under the nose. And you also see this kind of sharp shadow coming from the chin because the light is up and the directionals of the shadows are going down. Butterfly lighting, I think, is highly underutilized. I don't see it used as much, and I'm going to try to actually utilize it more in my work. But as you can see, it's very beautiful. You still get some a little bit. There's not much mystery left, but we do have some nice shadows falling off into the side of the face. We also have some really cool shadows here under the eyes and under the nose. This type of lighting is also best used for portraits of characters who don't really have a strong jawline. This character does have a strong jawline, but if you want to kind of accentuate that jawline and make that character's face kind of stand out more, and they don't have this, butterfly lighting is the best way to do that because it does create this kind of like shadow underneath the chin, which actually will separate it from the rest of the body. So very cool lighting style, love it. Okay, so our next lighting setup that I wanted to talk about are kind of like my favorite lighting scenarios that I like to use. And I don't really have a name from this. I kind of just, this is my setup, like I said. So we're gonna start with our top light. Let me go back into our camera. So here's our top light and turn this off. And as you can see, you know, we have kind of similar to the butterfly lighting. So this is a combination of a few things. We have some butterfly lighting going on here, right? And it is creating the nice little butterfly under the nose. We got some shadows here. There's a lot of information still being revealed, but you know, it's at an intensity of, let's say, 35. And that's where that sits in my scene, kind of like directly above and angled down to give me a sharp edge on my chin also. And then I have my backlighting, which is this type of lighting, which once it's finished, you'll notice is similar to our badger lighting. So we turn that back on. You can see it's to the back, but it's also very similar to our loop lighting because it's a little off-centered to our character. So if I turn that off, you see how it actually brings in a little bit of the more edge detail that's back here on the left, excuse me, on the right. So I'll turn that back on, and you know, we just added more information there. It looks a little bit nicer. This one's kind of falling off into the shadows here. So same thing, I added a light to the right. This is going to be at, I have them all at the similar intensity, which is fine. And then now we kind of have filled in that side there. And we do still have some nice shadows coming from the top of our main light here, but we also have our back shadows kind of giving us some dimension, and we can see our character kind of fall off into the light. And I think this is one of my favorite lighting setups that I like to use when I'm doing any type of portrait, to kind of reveal any detail in the face and the lips and kind of still keep this sense of mysteriousness. Okay, let's move on to another example. Color in lighting is, as I've come to learn more and more about lighting in CG, is very, very important when you're trying to actually tell a story. So it's good to understand what the capabilities of using color are. So now, as you can see, I have this kind of top lighting coming down, and there is a lot of mystery in what's going on in this shot. First of all, like we spoke about before, with this type of lighting setup with color, we're trying to figure out what the environment is. Where's this light coming from? What light source is actually producing this light? So that's, you know, trying to tell a story. And we also don't fully know what's going on with the character inside the frame. They're very dark and mysterious. We can't tell if they're angry. We can't tell if they're neutral. and that also kind of helps tell a story. So the other one is simply by taking the light and then moving it forward. Now we actually have revealed a lot more information about our character, and we've pretty much used the shadows of the horns to kind of wrap around and frame the important parts of the character's face, which are the eyes, the nose, and the mouth right here. Simply by just taking, let's grab our backlight, and I'm just going to demonstrate this live. Simply by just taking our backlight and moving that forward. Now we have a completely different lighting setup. We understand, who our character is more so because we can see more features in their face. We're still a little bit out of the loop on what lighting source is actually causing this color tint on our character. And I'm going to show you guys how to get this kind of lighting tint. I mean, even right there, just moving it directly above it, we get a completely different style of look. So always remember, when you're doing any type of look development, don't just set your light and then think that's going to make this image work. If I just set one light, move it up, down, left, right, rotate it. A simple rotation will also give you kind of a different look. So if I take this light and let's say I rotate it back this way, now we have a completely different look, even though my character is still being lit. Every look has been different simply by making random changes into the, so now we have a different look. So let's put that back and let's try rotating it on its side here. Hold on one second. And then let's rotate it on its kind of, axis that way. Now we kind of have this weird lighting where everything here is completely in the darkness, but this is kind of in the light, and we have this crazy long shadow that's coming under the nose. So always remember to try to, oh, that's a different look too. Awesome. But like I said, always try to move your lights to get an understanding of what's going on, and we'll get a better idea of how I do this once we actually start lighting some of our scenes in the next couple of videos. So with that being said, these are the different lighting setups. When you come into this project file, take a look at these annotations that you see on the side here. I put this together for you guys to kind of reiterate what these different type of lighting setups are, when they're best to use, and how to utilize those. So definitely check that out when you actually get the project file. So with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. Now we're going to start getting, putting this stuff into practice. I deem it very important for any artist, to fully understand kind of like the different lighting setups that were created by the masters and the rules of that lighting. And then once you have an understanding of that, then you can start to make your own rules and start to make your own kind of lighting setups and kind of break those rules and evolve the lighting, the current lighting scene that we have in motion design and visual effects. You may be that individual who creates a whole new lighting setup that just pioneers a whole new level of filmmaking. So keep that in mind. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will see you in the next video.